During the 50s and 60s, there was a lot of street music groups. At every corner, there was a group that was singing. In every group, there's always one individual who stood out the most. This individual had a voice that's so good it could be compared to Sam Cooke, and he could dance his ass off like James Brown. This person was Jackie Wilson. Now Wilson, he inspired a lot of future legends, and at the same time, he lived a hell of a life. Now Jackie Wilson, he had a lot of ups and downs during his lifetime, but nevertheless, he's a legend at best. So, without further ado, let's cue that intro. Born Jack Leroy Wilson Jr. on June 9th, 1934 in Highland Park, Michigan. He's the only child to Azalea Mae Wilson and the singer-songwriter Jack Leroy Wilson Sr. Now Wilson, his mother was from the South, Mississippi to be exact, and he spent a lot of time there in his early years visiting his grandparents. Now while in the South, Wilson, he found a love for singing, and when he was 6 years old, himself and his mother would sing together in a church choir. Now Wilson, his father was an alcoholic and he became absent a lot. In 1943, his parents would separate when Wilson was only 9 years old. Now, with his father being in and out his life and growing up without a father figure, Wilson, he found himself getting in trouble a lot. He would grow up in a Highland Park neighborhood, and growing up, everybody called him Sonny. He would join the local gang called the Shakers. Now, back then, you either was part of a gang, you went to school, had a job, or you was part of a singing group. At a young age, Sonny, he developed an urge to hustle, and at the age of 12, he would form a gospel group, not because he loved the music, mainly because it was a chance for himself and the group to bring money to shoot dice and get wine. The Shakers, they played a huge role in Wilson's early career, as they would be his protection when he would go to different neighborhoods to sing. Now, being in the gang then and now will leave you with a list of trouble. Sonny, he would drop out of high school in the 9th grade and at the age of 15. He also would find himself spending some time in juvie. During his second term, he learned about boxing and gained an interest in the sport. When he got out at the age of 16, he would participate in the Detroit amateur circuit. Now his Golden Gloves record was 2-8. Now, this is a side note. I really don't know if Jackie Wilson was really ass, but his record was 2-8 and his mama made him quit. During this time, Sonny, he got his longtime girlfriend Frida Hood pregnant at the age of 17, and they would get married with the assistance of her father. Now during this time, this act was forbidden. You got someone pregnant, y'all got married. Now, it was a rumor at this time as well. It was a rumor that Wilson was 16 and he had gotten over 15 girls pregnant. Now with Sonny being a father, he had a family to feed, and he realized that he needed something to do. So, he would rely on his talent and start singing in local nightclubs under the name Sonny Wilson. Now, singing in these clubs, it wasn't making ends meet. So Wilson, he would get a job at Ford, but that didn't last long. He would quit after 2 weeks, and he returned to singing. Now Wilson, he would form a group called the Falcons with his cousins, Levi and Joe Stubbs. Now, it's time for a fun fact. Did you know Jackie Wilson is related to Levi Stubbs, the lead singer of the Four Tops, Joe Stubbs, and Herbert Johnson of the Contours?
Let's do it, Soul Train Gang, for the one and only Jackie Wilson.
Thank you,
Jackie. Welcome aboard. And I don't know if you want to talk about how long you've been in the business, but I'm going to ask you anyway.
It doesn't matter. You go right ahead.
Well,
actually, since 1957, that's when I first started. I started with a young man that owns a small recording company. I think it's Motown, Barry Gordy Jr. Right. We both started about the same time.
And I just found out today that you're related to Levi, the Four Tops.
Correct. That's my cousin.
He said you gave him his first bicycle.
Correct.
Wilson, he would lead the Falcons and shortly join another group called the Royals. But things didn't work out. Wilson, he would leave the group, and after he left the group, the Royals, they would become the Midnighters, and they had found success. After leaving the group, Wilson, he decided that he needed help in booking the shows, so he would hire a manager named Al Green, and this not to be confused by the R&B singer. While Al Green, he had managed other singers like Laverne Baker, Little Willie John, Johnny Ray, and Della Reese. Green also owned two music publishing companies named Pearl Music, Mary Mac Music, and also owned the Detroit Flame Show Bar where he would meet Laverne Baker and later Berry Gordy. Wilson, he would record multiple songs under Dizzy Gillespie label DG Records. These songs would help Wilson gain an attraction, and in 1953, Billy Ward became interested in Wilson. Billy Ward was looking for a replacement for Clyde McFadden, so he would have Wilson audition, and when he did, he blew everyone away. Although this was his big moment, it almost went away when he was going around saying that he was the better singer than McFadden, even going as far as calling himself the shit Wilson. He would quickly humble himself and learn whatever McFadden would teach him on his way out. Now, being a part of this new group, they would mold him to become what they was missing, and they changed his name to Jackie. Now, he would go by what the world knows him as today, Jackie Wilson. Wilson, he tried to carry this group as being the lead singer for 3 years, but without that popular member, the group had failed. In 1957, Wilson, he decided to go solo and pursue his career. Now, while being a solo act, he would collaborate with his cousin Levi from time to time. On a regular basis, he would perform at the Detroit Flame Show Bar. Now, his manager, he saw the work that Wilson was putting in. So, word got out, and he was able to land Wilson a record deal with Decca Records, who then signed Wilson to their sub-label, Brunswick Records. After receiving great news on landing a record deal, things started off slow as Wilson's manager would pass away. His business partner, Nat Thornpool, would take over and shortly become the president of Brunswick. In 1957, Wilson, he would meet a young man who had high ambitions of making it into the music industry. This young man was Berry Gordy. Berry Gordy, his sister Gwen, and Jackie Wilson's cousin Billy Davis, they would write Jackie's earlier hits, most notably Reet Petite, that was released on August of 1957. This song would reach number 62 on the Billboard Hot 100 charts, number 6 on the UK charts. The trio, they will go on to produce 6 more songs for Wilson titled To Be Loved, I'm Wondering, We Have Love, That's Why I Love You So. This song will reach number 13 on the Billboard Hot 100 charts and number 2 on the R&B charts. I'll Be Satisfied that reached number 20 on the Billboard Hot 100 charts, number 6 on the Billboard R&B charts, and Lonely Teardrops that reached number 7 on the Billboard Hot 100 charts and number 1 on the Billboard R&B charts. Now, this song had earned Wilson his first ever gold disc for selling over 1 million copies. So Jackie, with him becoming a mega star, he started to love the spotlight. Also, he had an amazing on-stage presence. Now, one thing about being a performer, you need to know how to rock the crowd. And boy, Jackie know how to get the crowd moving. The world began to call him Mr. Excitement because not only did he dress to impress, but what he did on stage was one to be seen. From throwing the mic, catching it, doing spins, flips, all while still singing. Now, Jackie Wilson, he inspired a lot of artists from Michael Jackson to Elvis. Now, Elvis, he was such a huge fan of Jackie Wilson, and he made it a goal to meet his idol. So when the two would meet, they instantly became close friends. Elvis looked up to Jackie so much, the two, they started to look alike. People, they will go as far as saying that Jackie Wilson was the black Elvis. And Elvis, he was asked about this, and he said, quote, "I guess that make me the white Jackie Wilson," end quote. Jackie Wilson would say that he was inspired by Elvis as well. even going as far as saying that most black solo artists had stole Elvis stage. I really think the duo was just so close they didn't want to step on anyone's toes, so instead they would just give each other compliments. But to think about it, Jackie Wilson, he did so much on stage. It's safe to say that everyone had learned a little something from Jackie Wilson. Jackie Wilson, he was a regular performer on TV shows like the Ed Sullivan Show, to name a few. In 1958, Davis and Gordy, they would leave Brunswick Records due to not receiving royalties from the hits of Wilson's songs that they had helped create. Now Davis, he would go on to become a successful songwriter and producer for Chess Records. Meanwhile, Berry Gordy, he had borrowed $800 from his family along with the royalties he had already received and started up Motown, which had launched in 1959. In the 1960s, Wilson, he started to see success along with a major holdback. In 1960, Jackie Wilson, he was arrested for assault when he assaulted a police officer when the officer had shoved a fan for trying to come on stage. February of 1961, he was shot in the stomach by his supposed lover, Juanita Jones, when she caught him with his future wife and former model, also being the former girlfriend of Jackie Wilson's close friend, Sam Cooke, Arlene Harris. Due to this incident, Jackie Wilson, he had lost a kidney, but when he was leaving the hospital, he left with a smile on his face. Early 1960s, Patti LaBelle, she had accused Jackie Wilson of sexually assaulting her backstage at a Brooklyn theater. In 1961, Wilson, he had also gotten into a lot of trouble with the IRS. It was coming for him from unpaid taxes. Now, while Wilson is steady making hits, living his life behind his back, people that was close to him was being fouled. Wilson's manager had took advantage of his ignorance and mismanaged his money.
How does a rock star who makes so much money lose it all? If you're too young to remember American Bandstand in its heyday, you may not know Jackie Wilson. He was one of rock and roll's first big names, stars who were the envy of their generation, not only having the time of their lives, but making fortunes along the way. Yet in Jackie Wilson's case, Bob Brown found a different story. If the music of rock and roll helped shatter innocence, the business of rock and roll was not an innocent game.
But this is a story of how Jackie Wilson died riddled with debts, without even a headstone for his grave. A man whose money problems had worsened through the years because of the way his managers had shuffled his income and expenses and tax obligations. Academy Award-winning songwriter Al Kasha got his start writing for Wilson.
He didn't know how deep in the hole he was getting, further and further in the hole to them, and the books were never honest anyway.
I became very much aware of his plight, you know, as a lot of the other singers had the same situation.
Singer Mary Wilson, formerly one of the Supremes, and Joey D., who sold millions of twist records in the 60s, understand from their own experiences how a star as big as Jackie Wilson might wind up with very little to show for it.
There were lots of double dealing, double contracting, and just sheer ripping off of the act. You must understand, the acts in those days were teenagers going against corporate people.
And as kids, you don't think that it's a cold business. I think you grow up and you find that out.
On September 29, 1975, Jackie Wilson had an apparent heart attack and collapsed on stage at the Latin Casino in Cherry Hill. He was 41 years old, and for the next 8 years until his death, he remained incapacitated, brain damaged, in a New Jersey nursing home. That was when some of the financial realities caught up. Even though he'd been a star for more than 20 years, Jackie Wilson was in debt. He owed an estimated $300,000 in back taxes and well over $100,000 to a company owned by the man he had trusted to keep his financial affairs straight. It was a classic story of how money had melted away from a young performing artist and materialized in other people's hands. Wilson's manager was a man named Nat Tarnopol, who was also president of Brunswick, the recording company for which Wilson made all of his hits. The debts that Wilson owed to Brunswick were, in fact, among the most common means of exploiting an artist's earnings. Not only was there no investment on behalf of Jackie Wilson's future, and not only was a mountain of debt being run up against his name, Shortly before Wilson's collapse in 1975, Nat Tarnopol and other Brunswick record executives were indicted for tax evasion and mail fraud in a bribery and payola scandal. Among other things, it was charged that Brunswick record artists, and Jackie Wilson was far and away the most popular, were defrauded of royalties, the money they were supposed to earn from sales of their records. Nat Tarnopol was convicted in 1976. A federal appeals court overturned the conviction 18 months later, but the judges took pains to add in their opinion that they were satisfied there was evidence from which a jury could find that Brunswick artists had been defrauded.
In 1964, Jackie Wilson, he was arrested for running from the police. Also, March of 1967, Wilson and his drummer, Jimmy Smith, was arrested on a, quote, morale charge, end quote, for entertaining two 24-year-old white women. It's crazy that at the height of his career, not only did he face some trouble, but he was broke in his prime. In the early 60s, Wilson, he dropped songs that was hits like Dogging Around that reached number 15 on the Billboard Hot 100 charts, Night that reached number 4 on the Billboard Hot 100 charts, and number 3 on the Billboard R&B charts, Baby Workout that reached number 5 on the Billboard Hot 100 charts and number 1 on the R&B charts, Alone at Last that reached number 8 on the Billboard Hot 100 charts and number 20 on the R&B charts, 11 on the Australia charts and number 50 on the UK charts. My Empty Arms that reached number 9 on the Billboard Hot 100 charts, Higher and Higher that reached number 6 on the Billboard Hot 100 charts and number 1 on the R&B charts. And lastly, I Get the Sweetest Feeling that reached number 34 on the Billboard Hot 100 charts, number 12 on the Billboard R&B charts, and number 12 on the UK charts. By 1975, the only relevant artist that was left on Brunswick Records was the Shy-Lights and Jackie Wilson. As Jackie's popularity began to slow down, he found himself doing review performances. September 29, 1975, at the Latin Casino in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, Jackie Wilson, he was suffering a heart attack in the middle of singing the song Lonely Teardrops. He would collapse by singing the words, My Heart Is Crying. Everyone who was there, they thought it was part of the show. Due to him being unattended for at least 30 minutes, it had caused little to no oxygen from going to his brain, which led him to slip into a coma. By June of 1976, Jackie Wilson was left not being able to take care of himself. As he was aware of his surroundings, he was unable to talk nor move. During Jackie's lifetime, he had seen a lot. He'd been through a lot. Having a father of a lot of children, before his death, he had to bury 3 kids due to some horrible circumstances. No parent should have to bury their kids. That's a worst parent nightmare. On January 21st, 1984, Jackie Wilson, he will pass away due to pneumonia at the age of 49.
Now, 5 years after Jackie Wilson's death, the bizarre twists and turns involved in setting the record straight are continuing, and in a way, Jackie Wilson is still being exploited. Remember, music and recordings can continue to earn royalties long after an artist is gone. And there's no question that Jackie Wilson's music is still making money. But all of this potential income, which sources told us could add up to hundreds of thousands of dollars, instead of going to Wilson's children and grandchildren, is in a kind of limbo. Here's why. Even as he lay incapacitated, there was a battle over the guardianship of Jackie Wilson's estate. Among those involved in the several rounds that took place, Lynn Guidry, the woman he was living with at the time of his collapse, and who says she thought she was his legal wife. She had 2 of his children. Also competing for the guardianship was Harleen Wilson, who had been separated from Wilson 5 years before his collapse, but never divorced from him. She is the mother of his son, John. And at one point, guardianship of Jackie Wilson's care was also sought by Joyce McCrae, a fan who wound up moving to New Jersey after claiming that Wilson was being exploited even in the nursing home because his interests and treatment were being neglected by those who should have been closest to him.
Where were they, this loving family? They've been like vultures over a carcass.
You're convinced Jackie Wilson was
neglected in the time he spent in the hospital?
Absolutely.
Deliberately neglected?
Yes. Yes.
Joyce McCrae claimed that when she visited Wilson, she found him with signs of physical abuse and sloppy care. She took these photographs and films to demonstrate it, claiming there was a conspiracy to deny him proper treatment. Some members of Wilson's family, in turn, said it was Joyce McCrae who was exploiting him because she was selling the photos she took to a national magazine. Wilson's son, John.
She is just like an itch. You know what I mean? She has caused a lot of problems in our family. I don't even know where she came from.
In 1978, the guardianship was awarded to John Wilson's mother, Harleen. She had known Jackie Wilson since he first sang in Harlem's Apollo Theater. And despite her separation from him, she was still, in the eyes of the court, his legal wife. And she defended herself against accusations that she was in it for what the estate might eventually bring to her.
My position at the time was I wanted to just take our son to visit with his father. But many people started vicious rumors and released many vicious stories to the media, many which involved me.
On Jackie Wilson's death, Harleen was named administrator of the estate in New Jersey. Did that mean there was finally a structure for setting things in order for his heirs, for hiring attorneys to track down the money? Not yet, because things changed again dramatically when Lynn Guidry, the mother of Wilson's last two children, challenged the New Jersey estate under Harleen and filed to set up an estate in Georgia, where she had lived with Wilson. Lynn Guidry claimed the separation agreement that Harleen and Jackie Wilson had signed meant that Harleen had no rights to the estate.
I don't particularly care about the money, other than I want it for the children and the grandchildren. I think Harleen has no right to inherit. She signed away her rights when she signed her agreement.
Until that dispute is settled and one of the two competing estates under Lynn Guidry and Harleen Wilson is declared the estate, Jackie Wilson's heirs will continue to be denied the payments that are due them. And the companies that should be making those payments can excuse themselves by saying they don't know who to send the money to.
Jackie Wilson, he inspired a lot of artists that ruled our world at some point in time. And Jackie, he is simply a legend that paved the way